Jim, let's begin by thanking you, as I always do with all the guests, for giving me some time today. I know me and Chris, we've been really looking forward to having a chat with you, so thank you very much.
Well, thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, of course, we're here to have a chat about your upcoming book, Caught with My Pants Down and Other Tales from a Life in Hollywood, which is going to be released on March the 23rd. And I know for a fact me and Chris are going to buy it. And obviously...
Well, there's 2 sales right
that's
away.
It.
I can quit while I'm ahead.
We don't, of course, want you to give all the stories out of it. We want people to buy the books. But, I mean, you've got such an amazing body of work. I'd love to know and start this off by... where did you begin when you putting this book together? Because you must have so many incredible memories and experiences that you could put down that people would be interested in.
Yeah, I mean, I hadn't thought about writing a book like this at all, but until I did something in 2017 for the Screen Actors Guild. They asked me to do a thing called Inside the Industry, Let's Talk About It. And it was basically me being interviewed by an entertainment reporter from the Wall Street Journal in a 200-seat theater in Beverly Hills. And I didn't prepare anything. I went along and thought, well, I'll just, waffle my way through this. I'll tell a few stories and answer some questions and be done with it. And I had a really good time. I really enjoyed it. And it seemed to go down fairly well. So I came away thinking, well, maybe I'll kind of break my long theatrical hiatus and write this as a one-man show, and I could do 90 minutes just wandering around, talking about goofy stuff that's happened and telling shameless name dropping and telling these stories. And then I started writing, but it very quickly became a 10-hour long show, which I thought would test the patience of any theatre-going audience. So then I sort of thought, well, I better write a book. I don't really have a choice now. And then I sort of started it. And then about, I suppose, it was literally, I'd written a very small amount of it. And then we hit this thing called COVID. I don't know if you've heard about it. It's a kind of a virus thing that's been going around. And so we were in lockdown for a while. And what would have taken me probably 5 years to write suddenly took me 5 months. And then I had to obviously rewrite it and decide what would stay in and what would go out. That's really the genesis of it. And it was a weird thing to do because I tend to look very much forward or just in front of me when I'm through life. So to actually be able to sort of take stock and look backwards was kind of unusual. I mean, it was a privilege to be able to do it. And that sounds weird, but to stop the merry-go-round for a year, basically, which is what happened to most of us who weren't in vital industries, was kind of a great opportunity, especially at my age. At that point, I was just entering my 60s. I was like, okay, well, let's look back a bit. But it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy. It was kind of like pulling teeth in a way. Some things came very quickly, and others were like, oh, did that happen there or there? And again, it's so it was weird for me to dwell on the past.
Can you remember what the first one was that you wrote down? The first memory that you wanted to put pen to paper, as it were.
Well, the first story in the book is from drama school, and it sort of, I think it was the first story I told, one of the first ones in that evening in the theatre, but it was essentially. It was my first day at drama school and how I knew that I could cut it as an actor. And what happened was. I'd been at university and wasn't used to kind of getting up early and going to this sort of structured student thing. So on the first day at drama school, but when it came to lunchtime, I was really hungry because I'd been up so long compared to what I used to do at university, where I'd roll out of bed at 3 in the afternoon. So I went out. Some people brought their lunch in. Some people went out to pub or whatever, went home. I went to this little hole-in-the-wall Chinese restaurant and ate a massive meal. I was really hungry. And I ate everything on the menu. And I kind of waddled back to this drama school. And I looked at what our schedule was. And it was a thing called Movement, a class called Movement. Now, the only movement I wanted at that point was not what they had in mind. So I changed into the gear we had to wear. And it was the first time I put this on. We had... for movement class or anything like physical, we had to wear, it was really bizarre, these black roll neck sweaters and black tights. Now, I was really self-conscious to begin with. And so you're going into this class. It's about 2/3 women, 1/3 men, I would imagine. So I'm really like trying to be cool. And the teacher was this kind of slightly camp American guy who said, okay, we're going to start with headstands. You'll come to this mat here, get into the headstand, we'll hold your feet, and then you roll out of it and we go through the line. So I stood in line as near the back as I could. And a few people did this alarmingly well, in my opinion. And then I came up, went into my headstand, just about managed that without making a tit of myself. And then he said the usual command, and release. And the two people holding my feet let go, and I came down on the mat, and I did release. I released the most enormous, loudest, hardest, sharpest fart you have ever heard in your life. It was like a gun going off. And I lay there absolutely mortified. My eyes were closed, and I thought, this is it. It's over. Show business is not going to happen for me. I can never get over this. I'm never going to live this down. And I kept my eyes closed. And there was kind of a few seconds, you know, if you're a parent, you know this moment when a kid falls over. There's like a kind of delay of 2 to 3 seconds before the screaming and the crying begins. And it was like that. There was this kind of anticipation. I'm going, I'm going to hear an explosion of laughter and derision. And I waited and I waited and I waited, and nothing came. Absolutely nothing. And I kind of cautiously opened one eye and I looked up, and everyone was gathered around me, like looking down as if they were looking into an open grave. And I thought, what's happening? And then the teacher goes, oh my God, are you okay? What was that? And I said, oh, it's an old football injury. Yeah, it's my ankle. A few years ago it went, and every now and again it goes. And he said, oh, you're going to be okay? Does it? And he said, yeah, if someone could help me up. And these two very lovely actresses helped me to my feet and kind of led me away to a bench on the side of the studio, where I managed to sit for the whole of the rest of the class and sitting it out. And as they went back to join the queue again, these two actresses, I thought, that's it. I can do it. I'm an actor. I completely pulled this off. And then the kind of postscript to the story was that was a life-defining moment. I went, yep, no, I could leave now. I don't need the rest of the training. And then I went to the men's changing room, and people were saying, you okay? You know, it sounded terrible. And I went, yeah, I should be. It's maybe a couple of days. Well, you know what? Sometimes a couple of hours. In fact, to be honest, it feels pretty much okay right now. And then they all kind of left and went on to the next class. And one guy hung back, and he said, he was actually an American student, so that's too. And he said, can I ask you a question, Jim? I said, yeah, sure. He said, you farted, didn't you? And I said, yeah, I was busted. I went, yeah, I did, yeah. And he went, oh, fucking A, man. And he gave me a huge high five. And so from then on, my reputation was sealed at drama school because it got around very quickly that that's what had happened. So I got sort of pigeonholed as, quite a good improviser and a flatulent fellow.
Awesome.
Did that give you the confidence then just to fart at any opportunity and not give a damn?
Go and do that. Although I did. I remember doing a show at the Greenwich Theatre shortly before I left England. This is already, we've hit the bottom on this podcast. Basically, we're 10 minutes in, and we've got a huge fart story, and we got another one coming up. And I had this tiny part in this show at the Greenwich Theatre, and we were all sitting on the stage, and it was a matinee full of old people, and I let one go really loudly, and it reverberated throughout the whole stage. And it was like everyone was like just trying not to go. And then this old lady sitting in the front row turned to her friend and went, did you hear that fart? Really loud. And then the whole everyone on stage just completely lost it. So my history as a flatulent fellow, that's it. We'll move on to the poo stories next.
That's kind of our bar, to be fair. That's, so you fit in really well. So yeah.
Good. So that's you've got the free sample of the first chapter of the book, abbreviated slightly.
That's brilliant. That's just what we like to read, isn't it, Chris? Stories like that. It's amazing.
Yeah, and most of the stories, I mean, it is a collection of anecdotes, and mostly I draw conclusions from them of some sort, and some are quite serious conclusions, and some are sort of life lessons. But the one I derived from that was that you can fool most of the people most of the time, but not everyone, and that sort of was the lesson I got from that. Apart from the fact that yes, I could possibly act.
And you've worked with so many people. I mean, you look at the list of names that you've worked with over the years, and one early one in your theatre days in America, when you first went to America in the early '80s, George C. Scott. I mean,
yeah,
wow. I mean, please tell us a story about him, because I love him. Amazing actor.
Yeah, it was a weird thing. I'd gone over for 3 months just to direct a couple of shows at the drama school I'd been at. They opened one in Berkeley, and I did a one-man show while I was there that I had the rights to, and in a tiny theatre, and it took off in a very big way, which was fantastic, because I went from 0 to 10 in about a space of 6 months. And then it got extended there and booked into other places. And then it took me to New York. And my first audition in New York, I was cast by George C. Scott in Present Laughter, Noel Coward's Present Laughter, and he was also starring in it. And so, my career suddenly, having done sort of rep and stuff in England for fairly low rent, it was suddenly I was in a hit Broadway show, which was extraordinary. And about 9 months, after doing that one-man show, less than that. So that was amazing, and he was the first major star I'd ever worked with, and he was quite intimidating, very gruff, and was brilliant in the part, because normally I don't know if people know the play, but it's about an effete sort of light comedy actor who's very vain, and George isn't that at all. So being cast against type, he was much more like John Barrymore, that was a very masculine, rugged, and it was all the funnier. His preening and his vanity became all the funnier because it was very masculine as opposed to slightly effete. And Noel Coward. So he was great. What was interesting about George was that he really didn't like to rehearse that much. It was just business. Let's get in, let's get out. We learn the lines. And so it was an incredible cast. I think there was Nathan Lane made his Broadway debut. Kate Burton, Richard Burton's daughter, made her Broadway debut. Dana Ivey, who's a wonderful New York actress. Christine Larty, who people probably know from lots of television shows. And Christine was much more methody acting, and she would be like, George, what's my intention in this line? Or where? And he would just go, your intention is come in, say your line, get the fuck off stage, and then we can all go home. And that was basically his approach to acting. And it was mine too at that time. I'd done weekly and fortnightly reps, so you didn't have time to question anything. You just get in, say your line, get out, and hope you get a laugh. And Nathan was a bit like that, So it was an interesting experience, also directing himself. The other thing that I do remember distinctly, and I kept a count, he missed on average one show a week through illness, in inverted commas. I have never seen a man consume alcohol the way he could consume it. He had the constitution of an ox.
Wow. And
so he would go home after rehearsal and watch his beloved Detroit Tigers and drink. And I think he, didn't recover sometimes. But so he missed about one show in every 8. I remember the night before we closed, I think the show ran for about 8 months. It had a limited run, but it was fantastically successful. He took us all out to dinner at Gallagher's Steakhouse in New York. And we had one more show the next day, a Sunday matinee. And so we had dinner, and it was quite late, obviously, because it was after the Saturday night show. And come about 2 o'clock, I reeled home along with everybody else, a little worse for wear. And George was still there drinking, and I couldn't believe how much he'd packed away. I could not believe it. And there was an actress in the show, an older actress called Betty Henritzi, and she said, oh, yeah, I did a show with him, Shakespeare in the Park, when he was younger. And between shows, he would have, I think it was Shakespeare in the Park, he said between shows, he would have 17 martinis. Wow. Now that's in matinee evening. Now that would kill most people.
Yeah.
But I saw him pack away at least that in Gallagher's. And then I showed up at the theatre the next day for the matinee. And I was walking towards my dressing room, and his door was just slightly ajar. And I heard this voice go, Jimmy, come in here. So I went in, cautiously went in. And he was sitting in his boxers, his underpants. And you knew with George, this is another story I tell later in the book, that with a director friend a director who'd worked with him, the less clothes he's wearing, the more drunk he is. That's basically the rule. So I knew we were in a bit of a trouble right here. And he started talking to me, but he couldn't really get a sentence out. So, what did you just all that, tell Nathan I gotta come in here and we'll do the show. And I thought, we're done. With this show is not going to happen. And I went to the stage manager and said, I think we're going to have to cancel, because his understudy had already gone home, I think. And we were about 15 minutes to go. And Mike, the stage manager, said, well, let's just see, we can't, with a theatre full of people, we'll have to give it a shot. And I said to Nathan, who I was sharing a dressing room with, we're completely, can I swear on the show? I've already sworn. We're completely fucked. So we ended up doing the show, and it was extraordinary. George did not miss a single beat or a single line or a single joke. It was exactly the same performance he'd given, however many times in 8 months. Nothing. You would have had no idea. It was extraordinary. I mean, I literally couldn't believe it, nor could anyone else. But it was also utterly terrifying on many levels. So that's my that was my experience with George.
That's amazing. Sorry, Chris, go on.
No, I was going to say, how did you find the transition from like theatre and stage to TV and movies then? Because a lot of actors I hear in audiobooks and that I listen to, they say that it's very different and very difficult to get your head around the change.
It's obviously much more internal. I was the reason I left New York after 3 years. I was very fortunate. I did, I think, 4 Broadway shows almost back to back for 3 years in New York. But I always wanted to do film and TV. So the first, I would guess, 6-7 years of my career, pretty much all theatre. And I wasn't doing any. I'd done some voiceovers in New York, but I was getting no TV or film work. So I moved to LA kind of cold, and sort of to see how that would work. And I eventually kind of started to get a little traction and do some stuff. So it was a big transition in terms of, I'd done quite a lot of, I was in the original cast of Noises Off on Broadway. I'd done quite a lot of fairly big, farcy type comedies. So I wasn't used to underplaying things, put it that way. So it was kind of an adjustment. Now, multi-camera sitcoms where you have a studio audience is a little bit of a hybrid, but even then you've got to remember not to play to the audience and play to the camera, because it's just too big, unless you're doing Mrs. Brown's Boys, in which case it's not big enough. So a little dig in there. So it was a kind of a slight adjustment. The first thing I did was actually a drama. It was a Western. The first ever TV role was a Western, which I've never done one since. Which bizarrely Meg Ryan was in, and she just moved out from New York, and we were living in the same apartment block. But it was, I didn't really, I think I'd always been, even though I'd been in these big, broad comedies, I think I'd always been more of a face actor, and just a sort of slightly more subtle in some ways, even though I mastered the craft of, physical humor. I didn't find it a terrible adjustment. And then I think what really turned it around for me was when I did Best in Show, and I kind of did almost nothing. I literally tried to do anti-acting, and it really felt like that worked for me. I loved it. And I kind of enjoyed seeing my kind of ability not to work too hard. And that was a turning point for me. And I think my whole style of what I did probably changed then. I mean, I occasionally reverted back to some bad old habits. And there's a couple of films I look at and go, God almighty, why didn't the director pull me back,
So that kind of answers maybe a little bit of a question that not that I've been thinking about for many years. Because when Dave said, "Do you want to speak to Jim Piddock?" I was like, "Jim Piddock, okay."
Jim
So
who?
yeah, well, so then I looked on IMDb and saw your picture and was like, I recognise him from something. And then it was like scrolling through your IMDb. He's like noticing loads of TV work, loads of movie stuff, some video game voiceover. You know, amazing. I love video games. And then scrolling down, got to the end. I was like, I still can't picture where I've seen him before. And then get to 1989 and Lethal Weapon 2, and it's like, that's it. And it just kind of like the light bulb moment. I used to watch that film a lot with my mom on VHS, and you know, it's just kind of loved it. And you're in that scene with Joe Pesci and Danny Glover.
Yeah, Danny Glover
in the consulate. And that kind of, I suppose, what you've just explained about, you know, the transition and you know, becoming really good at comedies, because your scene is, although you're in it for a short period of time, is actually quite memorable because of your reaction to Danny Glover.
Yeah.
You know, when he asked the question, he's like, your reaction is, "But you're black," kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's kind of stood out for me. I was like 33 years like since that film came out, and I'm thinking, wow, I'm talking to Jim. And it's like, you know, kind of, I've watched that film so many times, and yeah, it's kind of crazy thinking about it.
That was my first ever film. That was my first ever film. I'd done TV before that, but no film. And the reason that line became kind of almost a catchphrase for the movie was because Joe Pesci, it made him laugh every time I said it. And he repeated it, I think, a couple of times later in the movie.
Yes.
He said, "But you're blick." And to this day, I still have people, I mean, incredible for first film to have a catchphrase in the top grossing film of that year, which was insane. And I still have people yell at me, you know, across the street, "But you're blick." And almost inevitably they are themselves black, which is hilarious. You know, I met some rapper and he's like, "Oh yeah, hi," and he went, "Oh my God, but you're black." And it's sort of become a calling card.
That's brilliant.
But it's funny you say about, you know, who is he? I in the introduction to the book, I say, you know, this isn't an A-list biography or autobiography, and that's why it's as much about the observed as the observer, because I don't think anyone's that interested in the Jim Piddock story. I mean, I'm not that interested in the Jim Piddock story, but I thought that, you know, the people I've worked with and sort of my journey from my angle was maybe interesting. But I said, you know, that if you stopped a random person on the street and said, you know, tell them my name, maybe 1 in 10 would know it. And if you showed them a picture of me, about 5 or 6 in 10 would probably almost certainly know it. And then if you gave them a list of all the things I've been in or written, I would say 9, probably all 10, you know, would say, yes, 10 out of 10 would say, I know, I've seen that or seen that. So I'm in a weird position. And the chapter I talk about it in is I do it in the introduction and say, I apologize for this, and I don't go around conducting these kind of surveys on the street, just so you know. But I said there's a chapter entitled "I Know You From Somewhere," and that's what I get a lot of. I mean, some people, obviously in New York and LA and sometimes London, people know. They just know if they're in show business, they usually know who I am. But there are so many people who, it's, you know, at a supermarket, some come and go, "Oh God, I know you from somewhere. What is it? Is your kid at Westfield School, or is it?" No. And then eventually you kind of mumble as humbly as you can, maybe because I'm an actor. And then you get that's a mistake, because then they say, "Oh, what have you done?" And then you end up having to sort of like recite your resume, which is a conversation no actor ever wants to get into on a public forum. It's like looking for a needle in a haystack, you know, that, especially with me, I've got, I don't know, 130, I don't know, credits, I don't know what it is. And a lot less interesting than looking for a needle in a haystack. But there was one woman who did it that really made me laugh. She did the same thing. I was in line to, "Oh, I know you from somewhere." And I just went straight back with, "Oh, okay." And I said, "It's possibly because I'm an actor." And she went, really, with absolute certainty, she said, "Oh, no, it's not that." And it just really made me laugh, because she was so sure. And I'm thinking, I almost couldn't reply. I was laughing, and she didn't know why I was laughing. I said, "Oh, well, I don't know then, because I don't know you at all." And she sort of then tried to figure out where it was. Where did I work in the local greengrocers or tools. We kind of got nowhere, and she still, I think, just never believed that it was because I was an actor.
But that's
so you can't win.
That's the thing, see, is that I love sort of, like I said, once I realised who you were, and so I'm so glad that you took that with the graciousness that, I didn't mean any offence by it, but it was a case of like, I love sort of seeing, you see these actors in different films and TV, and you think and say, they've been in loads of different things, and you think, oh yeah, I know them from somewhere, and then they pop up and they must have so many interesting stories, because they, like you said, they don't tend to be the focus of the piece, that but they see everything that's going on. So that's why I'm really looking forward to reading your book, because just like listen to Bruce Campbell's couple of books that he's done, and again, it's like, so he's worked with some of the biggest directors, biggest actors, but he's looking at it from a different point of view himself. You must have, like you said, that where's all of your inspirations come from?
Yeah, well, I mean, the thing is that for me, I was always set out to be a character actor and a disguise actor. To me, that was the fun part of it. And that I was able to do in the Christopher Guest movies. That's the definition. We all put on silly beards and wigs and, hats, and make ourselves look completely different as we can. So there was an element that people have an excuse not to recognize me, or to go, I look vaguely familiar. So there is that. And I think, my career has been sort of really right down the middle. I'm a sort of upper middle class part of the business. I've done leads in independent movies, big, roles, and carried them. But those are more art house movies, and the big commercial stuff, I've generally been, a cameo or a supporting role. So it's understandable. I mean, television is more of a medium where you're in people's living rooms and they do remember. But I was always, in American televisions, early part of my career. Now things sort of travel more. So I was far better known in America than in England. But then there's, as you say, for you it was Lethal Weapon. For a lot of people, it's Friends. Globally, one episode of Friends. I think I had 2 scenes in that episode. But there was like Elliot Gould was in that episode, and Morgan Fairchild and Christine Baranski, and they had, I think, less than I did to do in it. And you're thinking Elliot Gould was one of the biggest comedy stars in Hollywood just a few years before. And here we are, and we're all sitting here, the old lags on set, doing bits and pieces. But that show, globally, I mean, it's been seen by so many people, and multiple times, and multiple generations.
You mentioned Christopher Guest, and when I told Tina, my other half, that I was going to have a chat with you, she did have a question for you, because she and myself are big Christopher Guest fans. And she wanted to know, how did you come to be within, the Christopher Guest universe and be involved? Because Best in Show, A Mighty Wind, I mean, just absolutely superb. But how did you first make contact with Christopher?
I will tell you, in the brief version, there's a chapter called Double Duties in the book, which explains how it happened. I knew Eugene Levy socially, and Catherine O'Hara. And I'd met Chris once or twice at parties or people's houses. And I was at a point actually in my career where my writing career really taken off, and I was writing movies and TV shows, and I was beginning to worry that my acting career was sort of had been cancelled without anyone telling me. Wasn't unmutual consent, and so I hadn't done that much for that previous 6 months or a year. And then I got a call out of the blue from Eugene, and he said, look, Chris and I, we did this film. I mean, I actually went to the premiere of Waiting for Guffman. So he said, we did Guffman, and we're going to do a follow-up, but about a dog show. And there's a role I think you'd be right for. I'd love you to come in and meet with me and Chris. So I went into their offices, and Chris and Eugene are both, how do I put this delicately, socially uncomfortable. They're not the most gregarious of people. I am, believe it or not, an introvert by nature, but, in a social situation, I come out of my shell. And so I found myself babbling to these 2 people in their office just to fill the silences, because it was kind of really awkward. And then after about 10 minutes, I went, this is really uncomfortable. I'm going to cut this short. So I got up and I said, look, guys, here's a DVD, because we used to have those in those days, of some of the things I've done. I think Eugene knows a bit of what I've done. But Chris, I don't know if you do. So here's the DVD, and if it's in what you're looking for, I'd be more than happy to do it. Movie. I'd love to. And I love you guys. I think it's the best comedy troupe in the world, improvisational troupe. Mm-hmm. And so I went away, and I'm driving home thinking, oh God, how could I have handled that better? I was just a babbling idiot. And the phone rang in the car, and it was Chris. And he said in his very quiet, deadpan way, hi, this is Chris Guest. Would you like to be in the movie? And I said, yeah, yes, I'd love to. Then there was a sort of wrinkle after that, because I'd sold a show to the BBC as a writer and a producer with Mark Addy and Alex Jennings. And actually Hugh Bonneville was originally going to be in it, but couldn't because he had a clash. And Lee Majors, of all people, was in it. Oh, wow. It was a sitcom for BBC One. And I was doing that. And so they needed me for 3 days for Best in Show. And I thought, I'm not going to be able to do this because that's in Vancouver and I'm in London doing these 6 episodes. So, but we managed to work it out. The BBC were very good and accommodating, and Chris was too. And so what we arranged was I did the table read on a Monday morning of the show, which was called Too Much Sun. I gave my notes to the actors and the director. Then I went straight to Heathrow, got on a plane, flew to Vancouver, which is about 11, 12 hours or whatever. And then I had dinner that night with Chris and Eugene and Fred Willard, who's my partner in the film, the comedy partner. And they said, well, we're running a little behind, so you've got Tuesday off, which I was really happy about because I was so jet lagged. And then they sent me away for 10 minutes from the meal because they wanted to talk to Fred about what he was going to do in the film and go over it without me knowing, so my reactions would be completely genuine. And then the next day went by, and Tuesday night I got a call from one of the ADs saying, we're still a bit behind, can we bump it another day? And I said, yeah, it's fine, it's fine. And then Thursday, Wednesday night came, and I got another call saying, we're still behind, can you shoot on Friday? And I went, that's when I had to say, no, I can't actually. I'm on a plane on Thursday night because I got to be back for the tech run-through of the sitcom and the taping in the evening. And so we shot that. Fred and I shot all our stuff from pre-dawn till post-dusk on the Thursday in an empty stadium because they'd shot all the dog stuff. We had a few extras behind us to make it look full. And I can't remember if they did CGI on that film, but and then Chris would play back some of the dog show and we would comment on it. He'd say, okay, just now comment, or he would describe, okay, now it's the hound group and then somebody's hobbling in here, whatever. So I think it's probably the most amount of film that's ended up in a film, because we ended up being in the film for about 25 minutes, I think 30 minutes, Fred and I, across the last third act of the film. I think it's probably the most amount of film that's ever been shot in one day. I mean, it has to be, certainly that I've been involved with. Yeah. Because that's an incredible amount of footage. And it was just us all day, solidly, for 12 hours, I think. And Fred, of course, if people who know the film, it's kind of a bit of a cult classic. It was not even a cult classic, it's a classic.
It is a classic, yeah.
And still holds up brilliantly to this day. And Fred was a genius. He's a genius. And it was heartbreaking that he died while I was writing this book. He's in his mid-80s, but he and I had become extremely close friends, and I'd see him, 3 or 4 or 5 times a year. So that was a real loss, because people who don't know Fred Willard's work, you need to see it, because he's, I think, one of the great comedy actors, American comedy actors, certainly of my lifetime. He played the boorish American bull in a china shop guy, stupid guy, better than anybody in the world. I mean, he was a genius. And my job in that film was to be real and to be a dog expert, which a lot of people who didn't know my work as an actor thought I was, which was great. That was the ultimate compliment. And then to react. And I knew enough about comedy by that time that you don't compete with someone like Fred. I mean, that's a rambunctious monkey who's drunk and driving the car, so you've got to basically go along for the ride and let him get the big jokes in and then react to it in a way that you get 2 laughs instead of 1. And anyone that's been a straight man in a comedy act knows that you can actually often get as more laughs as the
Yeah.
straight man in
Yeah.
your reactions if you're clever, as the protagonist, as it were, or the provocator. And I think I did get my fair share. I mean, I certainly got a great one in at the end when he made the most inane joke, another inane one, a comment, and I just turned to him and said, "Yes, I remember you said that last year." And that basically just cut his testicles off. I beg you could hear them bouncing on the ground afterwards. And it was Chris edited it together brilliantly, because I was trying to get an arc of being bemused by this kind of idiot who I'm stuck with doing this TV show, but I can't show my horror because I'm live on television.
Yeah.
So he just gets more and more absurd, and I'm getting more and more bemused. Then I'm amused at first, and then confused, then bemused. And then finally, I'm fucking annoyed, but again, I can't show it. So I just sort of hide it. And my favorite bit in the movie is actually not that line where I stabbed him in the heart at the very end. But my favorite bit was when he said something really stupid. And I didn't have an instant reply. And I thought, no, I just turned very slowly and looked at him, and clearly had no idea what to say, and then just looked back and continued. And it was, to me, the funniest thing I've ever done on film in many ways. I thought it was so, and as I said, that film became a benchmark for me of, oh yeah, that's how you can, you don't have to do anything, and that was funnier than me coming back with a response at that particular moment, And Chris has always maintained, Chris Guest, that he tells people who are new to this kind of way of working, where it's, improvisation based on a very detailed outline, don't feel the necessity to do something. People don't, people are quiet in conversations, and you can react and only speak when you feel like it's time to say something. Mm-hmm. So that's hard to learn for some people, because they think, oh God, I got to contribute. The six of us in this scene, I got to get my jokes in, or I got to do this, I got to do that. And I think the clever people sort of just wait for their moment. I mean, I found that with Chris O'Dowd in Family Tree, which is a show I wrote with Chris Guest, and he and I were both in for HBO and the BBC. And Chris O'Dowd was the lead in it. And Chris was a master at that, Chris O'Dowd, knowing how to get laughs and how to react, because he was not the actual wacky guy doing crazy things. He was the person in the middle holding it all together. Yeah. And he was superb at that. And he got a bit worried at times, going, am I doing anything that's funny? And I'm going, yes, trust it. It's really funny, because you can't have everybody being a crazy, because you get out of reality. And with a sister who's got a monkey puppet on her hand 24/7, who everyone treats as a member of the family, and a best friend who's the stupidest human being on the planet, who says the most ridiculous, mentally ill things. You can't, there's no point in trying to out crazy the crazies. And so he was superb at navigating that and knowing how to be funny and get the lion's share of the laughs.
How do you stop yourself laughing in situations like that when you're getting, in the improvisational stuff, when you're getting stuff thrown at you that is hilarious, and you've got to react to it? Like you said, you reacted on Best in Show by just turning. How do you stop yourself from corpsing completely?
Well, people did say, how did you keep a straight face at Best in Show? And my honest answer is, I actually didn't, and you can see it. But it worked because the character could be slightly amused and be trying to hide it because he's got a show to do on camera. So you do actually see my corners of my mouth going, and I mean, just genuinely appreciate it. But that was me absolutely trying not to lose my shit. It's really difficult. I mean, this is awful to say. In a later Christopher Guest film, Ricky Gervais made his film debut. He was in that. And I knew, I love Ricky, he's brilliant. And I knew he's a terrible corpser. And his laugh is absolutely infectious, as people know. And in this first scene, I was really bad that day. I was bored, I think, or something. And I didn't have much to do in the scene. And I was sitting with Ed Begley. And Ricky had to walk past us and then talk to somebody in the scene. And it's so juvenile. It's so juvenile. And people are going to think really badly of me with this. But every time he walked by, I would either just go, I'd just do a little fart noise, just the slightest one at the moment he passed us. Or I'd go, oh, cunt, something. And he couldn't get a line out. He couldn't get a line out. And Chris Guest was going, what the fuck's, I know Ricky's a giggler, but this is ridiculous. And it got to the point where I had to stop because we would never have got the scene. And Ricky was such a good sport about it. And I went home that day and I went, what got into you? Why did you do that? I didn't know Ricky at that point that well. I just was being really kind of childish. And I saw him the next day and I said, I'm really sorry about that. I was really irresponsible. And I know it was your first film. And he said, he looked at me and he started laughing again. He went, no. He said, don't. No, he said, I would have done exactly the same to anyone I knew who was a corpser. He said, no, it's fair game. He said, yeah, no, that would have been me if the situations had been reversed. So I felt a bit better.
There's a great bit. I was watching your comedy reel that's on YouTube the other day, and there's a great bit in it. And I don't want to give too much away because people should go and watch it.
Oh my God, that was extraordinary.
All I'm going to say is it involves the word gonorrhea and you eating something. I'll let people put the pieces together. And so the actress that was with you, I was crying with laughing watching that.
My God, I know. That was Emily Blunt, the brilliant Emily. I absolutely adore Emily. And it was my first scene on the film. And I had actually, originally, the parents had rather big roles. And then they got cut down because they wanted the younger people in the film. But, boy, God, that was, it was incredible because Emily, I had never met before. I think I'd met her at the read-throughs of the film. And she was playing my daughter. And I'll just very briefly set the scene. And it's in a hospital waiting room. Mm-hmm. And I'm telling her, I'm a total womanizer, and I left her mother years before. And in each scene, you see me with a different Asian girlfriend who's half my age. It's a sort of running gag through the movie. There's a different one in each scene. And I'm telling her, my daughter, why her mother left me. It was because I gave her gonorrhea that I'd contracted in Thailand. And it was kind of awkward telling. And the director made a fatal mistake in this. Is this X-rated, this podcast?
Yeah, you can say whatever you want, Jim.
The director made a fatal mistake of saying, oh, great, this is really funny, Jim, it's great. And now I was eating this horrible big donut. It was like a bear's claw donut with tons of icing on it and stuff. And I was eating it throughout the whole scene, which was already making Emily laugh the whole time. And we have one of those things that happens when you sometimes meet actors. We couldn't look at each other in the eye because we just go. In fact, she'd go, and then her going would make me go. So he said, the director, Nick Stoller, God bless him, said, Jim, why don't you just ad-lib a line about how that donut reminds you of the frosting on the donut reminds you of gonorrhea. And it's classy, huh? Because this is so tasteless. This whole I brought your podcast to the lowest common denominator. I promise this book has a very high spiritual self-help side to it. And so I did this, and we never got it. We never could do it because every time I'd begin saying, as a matter of fact, this I was playing a guy from Manchester. As a matter of fact, this still not reminds me a bit of gonorrhea. And I couldn't even get to the word, and she was gone every single time. And you've seen the outtakes, and it went on and on and on. And you can finally hear Nick saying, "Just think of something serious. Just say the lines. Just don't." And Emily's going, "Okay, take a deep breath. Okay, I'm not going to laugh. I'm not going to laugh." And then we'd stop, and there'd be a pause, and I'd literally take a breath before I'd say my line. And she'd go, and she said, "Don't stop breathing. Stop taking a breath. That's making me laugh now." And it got to the point where we never, ever got it. And the scene never ended up in the movie. I think we sabotaged it. It's a shame because it really was funny. And I guess actually the corpse singers are funnier. The outtakes are probably funnier. So yeah, that was, it doesn't happen that often. Doesn't happen that often, surprisingly.
Really?
It's very rare on stage. I've made other people laugh on stage, but I'm pretty disciplined. I'm just the practical joker who kind of gets other people. Someone asked me in a different interview whether I'd ever made myself go. I'd ever crack myself up. And there was a Mighty Wind. It was another Chris Guest movie, and again, it never ended up in the movie because I played this very nerdy character who is kind of just the opposite of what I did at Best in Show, who is a bit of a tactless guy who doesn't quite know. He's a model train enthusiast and sells catheters for a living. And Catherine O'Hara and Eugene Levy had a scene where they were trying to rehearse this beautiful folk number, and I'm married to Catherine O'Hara, and Eugene is her ex. So it's kind of a slightly loaded situation. And I'm sitting there while they're rehearsing, eating a bowl of nuts, like cashew nuts, and reading something. And I'm sitting there in a jogging shorts that were those awful, I'd specifically asked these dreadful jogging shorts from the 70s, you know, those ones that were so short that you know, basically the last turkey in the shop is hanging out. So it's already, and my legs are wide open sitting in this chair, and they're trying to rehearse, and I'm I'm cracking open nuts. It was always cracking open walnuts with nutcrackers, and they keep you know, stopping them and then turning to me, and I'd be like completely oblivious. And then I thought I'll elaborate on this. I'll kind of, I'll do a bit here. And I dropped a nut into my shorts and then started trying to fish around to find it inside my shorts. And I couldn't do it without cracking myself up. And the crew and Chris, everybody just went every time because it was so disgusting and so shameless. And again, I don't think we probably did get it, but Chris had the good taste and sense not to put it in the movie because it was grotesque. It was appalling. And Chris and Eugene just they had to leave. I think I just ended up doing the scene without them because they couldn't do it without laughing. You know, I mean, couldn't get through it.
You'll either be thrilled or horrified to know this. You possibly know it already, but the first picture that if you click on IMDb is that actual shot of you. I'm looking at it now with you with your shorts on and some sandals on, and you can see the nuts on the table. Yeah.
Oh God, yeah. You're pulling my plonker.
I'm not. I can see it. I can pretty much see it in the picture, but no, I'm not pulling it, honestly.
Is it really?
Yeah.
You have to. I don't think I've seen that picture. You have to send it to me. Yeah, email me the picture. Anyway, I'm giving you very long answers to short questions. Sorry about that.
This is
your
great.
show.
Oh no,
it's short now. So tell me about you. Tell me about you.
I want to know, Jim, because we're talking about, you know, laughing and fun and everything. What about Dick? I mean, what a cast, people. Billy Connolly. Billy Connolly is a guy, and I've said on the show before, he made me laugh so hard. I honestly thought I was going to die. I couldn't catch my breath. It was back in '81. I went to the Isle of Man to see the TT races, and he was doing a gig there, and I watched him. And I can remember it now. I really, and this is no exaggeration, I really did think I might die because I can't breathe. I couldn't see half of what he was doing through tears, just crying with laughing. I mean, people like that, and Eddie Izzard, and even more. I mean, Eric Idle. I can only imagine what it must have been like to work with people like that.
It was amazing. I mean, Eric I've worked with many times. We became close friends after doing the worst movie that's ever been made, called Burn, Hollywood Burn, an Alan Smithy film. And there's a whole story about that in the book. But yeah, What About Dick came about. It was originally a film script that Eric had written called The Remains of the Piano, which was supposed to be a parody of the kind of all the Merchant Ivory type films. And it was very silly and lots of double entendres, absolutely full of double entendres. And it was at Miramax for a while, and we'd done a reading or two of it, and it somehow never got made, as these things happen. And Eric said, I think I'm going to write this as a film for radio. And I said, what? He said, no, it's going to be as if we were doing a radio show, but it's on stage and with old school effects. So you got a sand pit with things, and you got bells and whistles and things, and all the sounds are done on stage. And so it came about. He and the producer Arnold Engelman booked this theater in 2007 in Hollywood, and it was an amazing cast. It was Billy Connolly, Tim Curry. Russell Brand was in the second version, and Sophie Winkleman. They came into the second version of it. But Eddie Izzard, Eric, Jane Leaves, myself, Tracy Ullman, and Emily Mortimer were in the first version. And it was sold out within seconds, and it was sort of lines around the block trying to get returns and stuff. and it was amazing. And the show was hugely successful. And then we did 5 years later, we did it in a bigger theater, 2,000-seat theater in downtown LA. And it was filmed, and it was actually, now you can watch it on Netflix. It's What About Dick? And it's 2 hours of non-stop double entendres with probably one of the best comedy casts of British actors, British comedians you'll see. Other than, I'm thinking things like, what's the thing they used to do, the comedy things to raise money? Do you know what I'm talking about? They used to do them at the Palladium, the fundraisers.
Like Red Nose Day, things like that, or
what's that? Yeah, right, Red Nose Day, exactly. But there was something before that they did these shows. I mean, that's the only other time I can think of. But Billy probably, I mean, everyone was great in it, but Billy probably stole the show. He plays a Scottish detective with a terrible speech defect, and he was brilliant. And his question, I kind of got to know him very well through that, and sort of socially too. And he also likes Crystal Palace. He's a Celtic supporter, but I'm a huge Crystal Palace fan. For those of you, if this is going out on video, you'll see it on my shirt, the logo. So he had, when he first moved to London, he and his brother started watching Palace because they loved the name. He said, it's so exotic. And so he went down there and became a bit of a sort of part-time Palace fan. So whenever Palace win, I get a text. First person is usually Billy going, great win, whatever, you know. But he is, without a question, this was a question I got asked recently by a couple of people, who's the funniest person you work with? The funniest person I've met in my life is Billy Connolly. In work or out of work. I mean, at a dinner party, you don't want him ever to stop. You don't want anyone else to talk. Yeah. He'll tell a story and you go next. Just keep talking for 2 or 3 hours. I'm more than happy. And he's just genuinely, naturally the most funny person I've ever met in my life.
Yeah. I'm listening to his audiobook at the moment, Windswept and Interesting. And I don't know if you've read it or listened to it.
I've read it. Yeah. It's great. It's great.
It is, but he actually narrates it. So if you can imagine his beautiful voice, and he's kind of telling all of these stories, and it's amazing. Going to your book, which I'm really looking forward to, is that going to become available as an audio version as well?
Yes, I've done the audio book. I did that, finished it, and they've delivered that. So at the moment, I don't know when this is going out, but right now you can order the ebook, the audio book and the hard copy book. It's actually a paperback, not a hardback. Are both available to pre-order from March the 13th, and then everything is you can just get it on March 23rd. Amazon's the easiest, but any of the Barnes and Noble, whatever is your book store of choice. But Amazon seems to be most people's go-to. But yeah, you can pre-order it, and if you do that, you'll get it probably on March 23rd or 24th. But yes, that's the timeline. I was just going to read you from Billy, just going back a sec, because it amused me. I got about 3 dozen wonderful celebrity endorsements for the book, and most of them are very, very overly generous. But Billy was, I think, the one person who roasted me, which is great, because I wanted one of those at least, because everyone else is gushing. And he wrote this, which I said, Jim Piddock has written a book. Good for him. Jim hangs around in Los Angeles and goes to parties at Eric Idle's house, where lots of famous folk ask him what he does for a living. I've always liked him. He makes me feel very famous. I should do this with his accent. People feel sorry for him because he supports Crystal Palace, who helped to make up the numbers in the English Premier League. That was Billy Connolly. So Billy Connolly, CBE's lovely tribute, that cunt. So he has a sign hanging in when he owned a place in Scotland. I don't know, he still has it, saying there's no excuse for cuntishness, which is fabulous. There you go.
What I love is that, you know, like I said, from going back to, I suppose, my earlier kind of comment, question, whatever you want to call it, about, you know, first seeing, well, not knowing necessarily who you were by your name, but then discovering who you were through your work, etc., is that, you know, you connected to a lot of the people that we love, you know, and I think that's the brilliant thing. I'm looking forward to finding out a bit more about the book. Is like you mentioned, Eugene Levy and Catherine O'Hara, and we love Schitt's Creek, don't we, Dave? You know,
Oh yeah, yeah.
You know, you introduced me to that. It's such a brilliant show, and you know, like that's part of the reason why I think, you know, once I've realised who you were, and then looking at, I think I knew that you were going to have some amazing stories about the people that you know and people you've worked with throughout your life.
Yeah.
And to follow up on that as well, Jim, do you ever, and specifically since you put this book together, do you ever look back and go, holy shit, yeah, I've worked with them, I've had that experience and just take a moment to go, wow, you know, because just from the flavour that you've given us of the stories already, you know, we can't wait to read the book. So, but
absolutely,
does that ever hit you?
Yeah, no, I mean, I do sometimes pinch myself. I mean, when I was doing What About Dick, I was on the stage with those people, and it was amazing to be in that company. And I had a lot to do. In the first version, I probably had more than anyone. I was racing around playing character after character after character, from microphone to microphone. It became almost a running gag that I would do a new silly voice here and then another silly voice here, and it went on and on. So yeah, I did do sometimes pinch myself that I have had this career, which has been very, very broad in its scope, and I have worked with the most amazing people, and I knew that the book was going to be shameless name dropping. I knew that, and I don't apologize for that.
Oh, no.
One chapter I think is called Name Dropping for England, and I think people like that because, again, it's more interesting than the Jim Piddock story. But people in show business might be interested in what it's like to navigate 4 decades, 43 years I've been in show business. As both a writer and an actor and a producer. So I think there's an element of people who want to be in show business that will be interested. But you know, your average punter wants to hear about who's, you know, there is one chapter, and again, I can swear, can't I? I've already sworn so much. So why
I think so, yeah.
There is one chapter that it's the only thing that the publisher made me asterisk. And it was, it's 10 A-list actors I've worked with, 9 I loved, and 1 was a cunt. And in the book, it's 1 was a 4 asterisks. Okay, and I eliminate one by one who the good guys are, and I say why they're the good guys. And some of them are shocking, because I actually did this originally on Facebook, and people voted. I held like a contest that went on for over a week, because people were like, "Oh God!" And then each day I would eliminate someone. And there's quite a few candidates, you know, and no one, the vast majority of people didn't guess right. There are some that are like, okay, well, that's, you really are playing against type. I mean, Tom Hanks is in that list. You're going, really? Well, I guess you could, you know, that could be a curveball that no one was expecting, that Tom Hanks is really troublemaker. But so anyway, that is a chapter that I enjoy very much, and I think people will enjoy. And I absolutely eviscerate the person in question. I really don't pull any punches, and that is, I think, what people are responding to in the book, is that I am at a point in my career where I really don't care. And there are 3 people. That's it. 3 people that I totally eviscerate. 2 I semi-eviscerate, and the rest are it's all good stories. And there are people who you think maybe are 4 asterisks, and I reveal that they're not actually.
Yeah.
You know, far from it. I mean, Russell Brand is a Marmite to most people. You either love him or you hate him, and he's nothing like what a lot of people imagine. And I write quite a piece on him because I was actually asked to write an article about him for a magazine. I think it was called Town and Country. I can't remember what it was. And I blew the lid off what he really is there by saying, you know, he's a narcissistic, preening, self-involved, egomaniacal, sex maniac, ex-junkie, this, but I love him, and I'll tell you why. And I don't know him super well, I'll be honest. He's one of the most engaging people in a one-to-one conversation. For someone who has ADD, ADHD, he's incredibly focused, and his life has become so sort of spiritually orientated now and so other-directed, which is extraordinary for such a narcissist. And I love what I always loved about him was that he was the first to tell you all of those things about himself.
Yeah.
But he was one of the first people who responded when I said, I've got this book, I got a text almost immediately saying, whatever you want, I'll read it and give you an honest reaction. And I'm just going to plug the book with one more quote, okay?
Yeah.
I promise I won't do any more because this is shameless. And it's, he said, Jim has done that rare thing that perhaps only Michael Caine and David Niven have done before, conjured a funny, inclusive, whimsical, and magical tale about the peculiar interior of the world of film and film stars, as warm and immersive as fentanyl without the social damage, one hopes. Which I thought was great, and it was very kind, and it was my dream because I sort of, when I was growing up, the David Niven books were I don't know if I'd have ever come to Hollywood without having read them. I was so enchanted by it.
Yeah.
And he painted such a lovely, fun picture, and the stories are so good. Mm-hmm. And that was my benchmark. And I loved Michael Caine's memoir too. I mean, similar type of thing. So it was like the dream reaction. But I think I do that with a few people. I sort of say, well, this person has a terrible reputation. And I was dreading working with them because everyone said they were so difficult, and they were absolutely lovely. So there is some revelations of that kind, the people I give it to with both barrels really do. I mean, I don't just eviscerate them; it's scorched earth, and I piss on their corpse. And two of them are very much alive and well and very well known in show business, and one is dead, so he can't sue me. So that's okay there. But again, it's in good spirit, and I do it in a humorous way. And the biggest butt of the book is me, in terms of, telling self-deprecatory or embarrassing stories. Or I eviscerate myself on many occasions. Some of the appalling things I've done, and just shameless stuff that's just awful. And embarrassing things that have happened to me. I mean, hence the title of the book, which is based on 3 separate incidents of actually literally, I mean, it became a metaphor. Caught with my pants down is sort of a metaphor of, I'm going to reveal all now because that's what I spent my life doing, is sort of exposing myself. But now here's the real exposure. But the 3 separate instances where it literally happened to me, some interviewer I did recently on a TV show said, surely once is a mistake, twice the Oscar Wilde line, twice is careless, 3 times is some whatever. And how? 3 times, did you not learn? And I said, well, they were different circumstances, and they were in different countries. One was in England, one was in a doctor's office in LA, and one was in the south of France. And each time I got caught with my pants down, and in totally different circumstances. So that hence the title of the book, which is not a question you asked me, but I've just answered it.
No, the thing I've learned through this last hour or so of just chatting with you, I think, is that I guess, you don't take yourself or life too seriously, and you've learned to laugh at the situation that you find yourself in as well, and I guess that's what comes across, well, you started off telling us about, how you started your acting career by farting, sort of, and that's brilliant. That's what we love, isn't it? Those kinds of stories.
I think that's something I'd love to get out there for the people listening to the audio show and the people watching the video show. Lots of names have been mentioned. And like you said, Jim, everybody is interested in all the different names and people that we've talked about. But when it boils down to it, it's you, Jim, and the great body of work that you've put on stage, on camera, in TV shows, in films, and you as an actor, and the great work that you've done. It just boils down to that as well. And I applaud you for everything that you've done.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, there's a couple of chapters in the book that are more serious. There's a couple of emotional chapters, which actually have nothing to do with show business, really. There's 2 back to back that are definitely much more emotional. And I think a number of people, Hugh Bonneville was someone who really noticed. They said it's a tearjerker at times, which is nice to be able to do both. And so there is that side of it. And the other thing that was weird about the whole process, because I did set out to write a series of funny stories and anecdotes, and and keep it short and sharp, each one. And if there wasn't a good story in a chapter, it would go. It had to have a good anecdote in that story, in that chapter. It was out of the book. But one of the things that came through, which was really interesting, there were sort of three themes that came out of it as I was writing it, which I had no idea would when I started. And one was my eternal search for family, and my family, and what the meaning of family is to me. And I end up concluding that I actually have 4 families. My biological family, my immediate family, which is basically very small. It's my daughter and my infinitely better half, Annie, and my Crystal Palace family, which is a very, very tight family and a very large one. But it's a genuine one. I mean, I've been kind of hands-on involved with that club for 50 years. And my showbiz family. So and I kind of put the thread. It sort of occurred to me by the time I got to the end, and I went back and sort of accentuated what I was looking for in this part of my life. And I always found that each play cast I was in, or each movie cast, became my new surrogate family. And I think because I was searching for that, what my family was, I made a lot of friends because of that, and relationships that have endured ever since. And more than normally, you sort of might stay in touch with 1 or 2 people, but I have stayed in touch with a lot of people because they were, to me, family at that time, and that became valuable because of that. And we were in the trenches together. So that theme came through. And then the other thing that I think there's 2 other things that came through very strongly, and I can talk about it a lot in the last chapter of the book, is the importance of every choice you make. And this isn't a unique thought, so it's not a self-help book with this thrown in. But I did realize that every single second of your life, you're making choices. And they will determine who you are and what your life will be, your destiny and your character. And that suddenly became crystal clear to me as I looked back on my life, as opposed to looking forward and being in the present. And that was, again, it's nothing earth-shatteringly original that no one's heard before. But I think I make the point very clearly. And I point out where those moments were in my life that I went, going to America and staying in America, those were massive things. I was 24, and I had $100 in my pocket when I came. And there are certain moments that you make life-defining choices, and others that are not, but you never know. And you have to always remember, without getting preachy about this, because I really don't want to do that, but every single tiny thing we are in control of in that, or we're not, but we have a choice to make. I could have done this show. I could have not done this show. I could have, just kept it to 10 minutes and said, give you the broad strokes, or we could talk, whatever. And this show may reach someone who I never thought it would reach, and that inspire them to do something with their life that they wouldn't have had the courage to do, or not. Or it may make someone hate me who used to like me. I don't know. But every single choice it's like dropping a tiny pebble in a pond, the ripples. And I think we have to all realize that we affect not just ourselves, but other people. And that's really important as human beings to understand that. And if I am preaching to anyone, it's myself that I realized that in the course of the book. And sort of connected to that, the third thing is that it's so important to live life to the fullest. We are here for a nanosecond in the history of the world. It literally, I mean, if it's a clock, we're here just for the 11:58 and 59 seconds. We are really here for a blink of an eye. So don't wait, do it, whatever it is. Take the risk. Don't get stuck. I mean, my nightmare, when I was young, I used to get bored very easily. I was quite an introverted, shy kid, but I used to get bored. And I think that helped me choose a job I wanted to do, because I would have got bored shitless not doing that. And it made me take risks that I would never have taken if I hadn't sort of had that kind of attitude of what have you got to lose? And I think I say at one point in the book, I never turned down an opportunity to fail. And I've fallen flat on my face God knows how many times. My trousers have fallen down and I've been caught with my pants down. God knows how many times, metaphorically and literally. But that's part of it. And it's entertaining as well as if you can be. And it's sort of, there is also a bizarre kind of spiritual element to it. I'm not particularly religious at all, but I do think we have a sort of a spiritual nature. I hope to believe that we sometimes neglect, Yeah. Now, this is a slightly different ending. We started with farts and we ended up with spiritual.
No, I think it's a really good way to end as well. And I think it's great, Jim, that you're continuing to keep busy. You're continuing making those choices, making your way through.
Thank you.
You're continuing to make more memories that will hopefully be in another book sometime in the future. Who knows? And I know me and Chris, this last hour, well, over an hour, has flown by. We could talk to you for hours more. Maybe sometime in the future, especially when we've both, I think we're both going to get the audiobook, aren't we, Chris?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So when we've listened to that, have you again on the show, because there's so much we'd love to talk to you about with Jim. It would be great to have you back on.
I'd be happy to. I apologize if I babbled a bit, but
no, you're the perfect guest, Jim.
I don't get out much.
It's great. We love it. We don't have to say much. Let you come out with all the great stories.
Yeah. Well, it's been a pleasure.
I just want to say thank you for what you said at the end. I mean, I'm a big believer in, positive thinking and like you said, going out there and doing things. And, it's a perfect way to end the show. But, well, slightly better than that. If you can click on in the chat window, I have actually put a link in there, and then that will send you a link to that picture that I was telling you about.
Oh, I never look. Well, so you can cut this out when you edit. But, let me have a look.
Yeah, I've just seen
it. Just love to get your reaction whilst we're recording.
Oh my God. You're right. Actually, God, I can't believe that. I've never seen that picture before. Never seen it. Actually, that wasn't the scene, but because I was wearing running shorts. But I did sort of then have a running thing of that was in a hotel room with I don't know if that scene ended up in the movie. I think it did. Maybe it didn't. How the hell did that picture get out? But it was similar to that. And again, undignified picture.
But there you go. That's the first picture that people will click on when they, other than your headshot, which is
What did you type in? You didn't just type Jim Piddock and that came up, because that would be disaster.
Yeah. On IMDb, Jim Piddock, and then, like I said, got your headshot as the initial sort of one, but then looked at the first photo. There you go.
How hilarious! And I've never seen that before. People are always sending me pictures to sign, and from something, and I've never seen that picture.
Oh, maybe you should sign those and send those off to people.
Yeah, right across the crotch. But that was definitely that was another scene. But I'm going to go with this shorts thing as a theme in the movie. Yeah,
awesome.
What a tasteful guest. Thank you so much.
No, thank you, Jim. This show will be out before the book is released, so everybody listening to it and watching it on YouTube, go out and pre-order it. Or if you're listening or watching later, it's out already. Go out and buy it. But yeah, for the sake of the edit, Jim, thank you so much for your time. And again, hopefully we'll have a chat to you in the future. And like I said, both myself and Chris are really looking forward to the book. So thank you very much.
Yeah.
That would be great. I'm hoping to be in the UK in April, May to do a bit of promo for the book. So we'll see.
Oh, please let us know if you're doing any book signings or anything.
Yeah.
Good to come along.
Yes, I will. We're sort of sorting that out now. I'm trying to do one in conjunction with other. I should have mentioned that I've committed a large portion of any profits I make from the book, if it does make any, to two charities. One of which is the Palace for Life Foundation, which is Crystal Palace's charity that do incredible work in South London with getting kids off the streets and out of gangs and through sport and other activities. And the other one is BAFTA, the British Academy's BAFTA's Access for All program in the United States, which offers opportunities to underprivileged kids and minority kids who wouldn't normally have the shot at sort of entering the creative arts. Giving them a bit of a leg up in terms of how to enter the business or not enter business, but just to express themselves creatively. So those are two charities that are very close to my heart. And I decided early on this was a labor of love, this book. So that's basically where the money's going. So buy the book for the kids, not for me.
Yeah. All the more
reason. I won't see a dime of it. And I'd only waste it on silly things anyway. Thank you.
That's great. Yeah, everybody go and buy the book. If you didn't have a good enough reason before, now you have, definitely.
Thank you so much, guys. Be well.
Fingers crossed we get to meet then if you come to the UK then, Jim.
That would be lovely. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye now.